Kupchan is a professor of international affairs at Georgetown University and a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. He joins me now live from California. Professor, great to have you here with us on TRT World. So, President Zelensky made it clear he was ready to meet President Putin face to face, and President Donald Trump publicly backed that idea. Do you think that public pressure caught the Kremlin off guard and forced it into retreat, or was Russia simply never willing to come to the table in good faith?
You know, if you look at Russian behavior over the last month or so, you have to come to the conclusion that they may well not be negotiating in good faith, and they're just stringing along Zelensky and Trump, because this was a real opportunity to have a substantive face-to-face meeting, not necessarily at the leader level. I didn't think Putin was going to go to Istanbul, but at least send the foreign minister, send a team that is at the highest level underneath the president. And they didn't do that. And then today there was a big mess with the two delegations in different cities. So I would say day by day, one increasingly has to be skeptical about whether the Russians really want to get a peace deal.
Now, Professor, Donald Trump has said nothing will happen in Ukraine until he meets with President Putin, which basically effectively sidelines both Zelensky and Europe. Do you see that this as a signal that a Trump administration is reshaping the U.S.'s role in this war, possibly at Ukraine's expense?
Well, I think in many respects, Trump has been going over the heads of Ukraine and Europe since the beginning, picking up the phone and calling Donald Trump, having his team fly to Saudi Arabia to meet with Russian officials. So there's nothing new here. And I also think that on some level, Trump is right, that the best way to get Putin to make a deal is by offering a good relationship with Trump, by offering the prospect of a repair in U.S.-Russian relations. In some ways, Trump is Putin's ticket to coming in from the cold. But Putin doesn't seem ready to make compromises here. The deal that he seems to be backing is one that's completely unacceptable to the Ukrainians, would deny them the ability to raise an army, deny them the ability to get weapons from the West. That's in many ways a suicide pact for Ukraine, given Russian intentions. So I think we just need to see more sign that Putin is ready to negotiate in good faith and to make the kinds of compromises that he needs to make to get a real deal with the Ukrainians.
Now, Professor, let me ask you: when you look at these talks in Istanbul, they feel like déjà vu, echoing the attempts from 2022. But now the dynamics have changed with a shifting military balance, growing Western fatigue, and Donald Trump back in the mix. Do you think this is just history repeating itself, or are we entering a new phase in this Russia-Ukraine war?
Well, you know, I think you're right to say that things have gone in Russia's direction, both because the battlefield has tilted toward Russia. They're making gains. They're small gains, but gains continuing to take more Ukrainian land. And you can look at what happened here in the United States with the election of Donald Trump, and you see that Western support for the indefinite flow of aid to Ukraine is now shaky. And one has to ask about, where are French elections going to go? Where are German elections going to go? And so I think that to some extent, Putin is calculating that time is on his side. And that may be one of the reasons that he doesn't seem ready to really make compromises to get a deal here. I think it will take, as Zelensky was saying, more pressure on Putin, more readiness of the EU and of the United States to put more sanctions on Russia if it doesn't come to the negotiating table. Whether Trump is ready to do that, we just don't know.
And Professor, if you look at the dynamics now, it seems from all indications that Ukraine is being forced to agree to a ceasefire agreement which favors Russia. If such a ceasefire agreement materializes, what kind of precedent do you think it sets for the world?
Well, I don't think that a ceasefire in place works to the advantage of Russia, in the sense that Russia has momentum on the battlefield, and the best deal that Ukraine is going to get is one in which there is a ceasefire in place and the fighting and the killing and the destruction stop. I think the key is what happens on the Ukrainian side of that ceasefire line. What happens to the 80% of Ukraine that is still free and under the control of Ukrainian authorities? The deal here has to be one in which that part of Ukraine that is still free is a success story, free to make its own decisions about its future, free to become a member of the European Union if it so desires. We don't see yet any sign that Putin is willing to sign off on that deal, and that may well be why he seems to be playing the game of looking like he wants a ceasefire, but not actually delivering.
Professor, very quickly before I let you go, what are your expectations from the talks tomorrow?
Not much. I don't think the table is set for real progress. I still think we're going through the paces here. We need a more clear sign that Russia is ready to make some tough decisions and by a ceasefire that, yes, leaves them in control of what they have, but lets the rest of Ukraine make its own decisions about its future and become a success story.
Fascinating insights. Professor Charles Kupchan, thanks very much for talking to us here on TRT World. Really appreciate your taking out the time.